much for that very, very warm welcome. Thank you for coming out here today in this rally for Rod. This election, and you know it, I think, better than anyone else, is absolutely critical. This whole idea of this country being in the position that it is today is an abomination. This whole the words they use like new normal, that we're supposed to accept the fact that we're going to have high unemployment, low economic growth, not do as well as we had before, have the rest of the world disrespect us. That is not the new normal, it's the new abnormal. And it cannot be allowed to stand, and there's no reason why it should stand. This country has enormous opportunities ahead. When you see what is coming along in areas like medical care, and then you see what Washington's trying to do to suppress innovation in medical care, because make no mistake, the more power the federal government has over health care, the less we have of it, the less innovation we have. But amazing things are happening. Take that great scourge of cancer. I had cancer a couple of years ago, made real progress on it. But you know, they're beginning to get real breakthroughs on using our own body to fight these malignant cells. Finally, the promise is beginning to happen. We had a story in Forbes of cases, people on the verge, kids on the verge, and they're starting to come up with great breakthroughs. Right now, very expensive, but in true free markets, and Rod exemplifies free markets, you always turn what is today's expensive thing, today's luxury, into tomorrow's commodity. Make it available to everyone. So we got to continue with this kind of research and make it widespread. And people say, what do you mean about free markets? True free markets, where the government is not telling you what to do, always bring about miracles. Take, for example, how we came here today. Automobiles. 110 years ago, typical car cost the equivalent of $125,000. Along comes Henry Ford, goes through 2 painful bankruptcies, finally hits on the moving assembly line that turns a toy for the rich, for tinkerers, for hobbyists, into something that every working person can afford. Take, for example, cell phones or handhelds, whatever we call them today. You saw the first one 30 years ago, big as a shoebox. Battery life, 40 minutes. The first one out of Motorola, $3,995. Today, they're everywhere. They do everything except maybe grow hair. Maybe they'll do that in the next round. It's amazing. Everyone can afford it. 7 billion around the world. The whole world is now at your fingertips, and we're so spoiled that if we call Mongolia and it takes more than 5 seconds, we say, what a lousy service this is. It takes 6 seconds. It's amazing. It's amazing. But these kind of miracles become commonplace when entrepreneurs are allowed to do great things. We all benefit from it. What Lincoln talked about, the opportunity to improve our lot in life. That's what makes this country great. It doesn't matter where you're from, what you've done before, you can do great things. But that will be suppressed if this kind of government continues. Lawlessness, where they make rules up as they go along, where they ignore the written law, trash the Constitution, tell us what to do and not to do. It's one thing to say you don't drive when you're drunk, or you don't go 100 miles an hour in a school zone, quite another when they tell you what to drive, where to drive, and when to drive. So we've got our basic liberties at stake. And this idea that we have to accept a slow economy is just garbage. There are several reasons why the economy is not doing what it's doing today. One is a very potentially boring subject, and I hate to bring it up, even though I've got a book coming out in a couple of weeks on it, just shows you why. Why I don't write books for my 401k, you know. They aren't like great mystery novels. But it talks about what the Federal Reserve has done to trash the U.S. dollar and the consequences of it. Money simply makes it easier for us to do transactions with each other. In and of itself, unless you have a gold coin, has no intrinsic value, any more than a Coke check in a restaurant has intrinsic value. It represents a claim of something that you've produced, something that you have. And when government starts to muck it up, bad things happen. Money simply represents value, the way a scale measures weight, a ruler measures length, and a clock measures time. Imagine what your life would be like if the Federal Reserve did to clocks what it's done to the dollar. You have 60 minutes an hour. Imagine if they floated the clock. You have 60 minutes an hour one day, 90 minutes the next day. You soon have to have hedges, derivatives, futures, figure out how many hours you're working. Let's say you're baking a cake. It says bake the batter 45 minutes. You have to figure out, now is that an inflation-adjusted minute? Is it an Iowa minute? A Bangladesh minute? This makes life complicated. Leave it alone. We did it for 180 years at a stable value for the dollar. Since we started to trash the dollar, we was talking with Rod about it back in 1971. Do you realize growth rates in this country have gone down when they started to muck around with the money? If we'd had the growth rate since 1971 that we had from the end of World War II to the late 1960s, our economy today, and I hate to throw around numbers, but it's important, will be 50% bigger than it is. When you start doing this stuff over time, it has a real cumulative bad impact. Imagine what your life would be like if you had incomes today 50% higher. That's what happens when they start to muck around with things like money. Every country that does it falls behind. You don't get the investment you should, the entrepreneurship you should. And then you go from the money, you go to what they're doing in healthcare. Ask yourself, we were talking about it earlier, why do we have a healthcare crisis? Well, we're told it's because people like me are getting older. We want more healthcare. And it becomes more expensive. But ask yourself, why is demand for healthcare considered a disaster, whereas demand for everything else is considered an opportunity? If people want more cars, Detroit and other manufacturers glad to help you out. More apps, a lot of writers glad to help you out. Want more food, a lot of people in this state glad to help you out. So what's with healthcare? What they've done with healthcare is they've allowed a system to grow up where you don't have real free markets. You have pieces of it, which is why we still do it better than the rest of the world. And make no mistake, we do it better than the rest of the world, contrary to what the mainstream media will tell you. We do it. Our longevity is the highest in the world. Where healthcare has an impact. The reason they say we have lower longevity is because we're a big country. We drive a lot more, so we have more vehicular accidents and fatalities. We have more homicides, but that has nothing to do with healthcare. Obamacare did not stop people from driving in any way. So, but you take those factors out, where healthcare has an impact, we do the best in the world. Greatest longevity in the world. Above the age of 60, very hard to get longevity. We do it better than anyone else in the world. And as I just indicated, it's just beginning. We allow these great potential breakthroughs to be realized and turn what is today hideously expensive into something that becomes a cheap commonplace tomorrow. An MRI should cost no more than $50. We had real free markets working. And so healthcare is critical. And in terms of healthcare, Obamacare is not going to stand. That's collapsing in and of itself. We're not going to go back to where before. We're going to get a system with Rod's assistance where for the first time in our memory, patients will be in charge again. You see little signs of it. Just little signs of what can come. Just one example. Flu shots. Every season we go through the flu shots. Once upon a time, if you wanted a flu shot, you would make an appointment with the doctor, go to the physician's office, get the flu shot. Big deal. Today, they're everywhere. Go anywhere. Go to the gas station. Fill her up. But radical changes in delivery and the creation of healthcare. I was telling some people earlier. I saw a device the other day. You remember EKGs? When I was growing up, you put all this stuff on, big deal. Little device, put your fingers on the bottom of it. See the little eyes go up and down? It'll tell you need help or you don't need help. Just beginning. Now, there are a lot of false positives, they say, but these things get better. So you have great diagnostic equipment coming. You'll know instantly. Diabetic, know instantly without taking a blood test. Instantly, whether it's doing right or wrong. So great stuff is coming. We have to have a system where this be allowed to happen and have effective safety nets. We do it with food. You know it here in Iowa. You do it with food. Imagine if government ran agriculture the way it wants to do health care. We'd have no more obesity. We'd all be starving. Where they tried Russia, China, it did not work out very well. And so So we got to do with food what we do with health care. Why not? Food's more basic than health care. Don't tell me something's different. Everything is different. Every industry is different. But you allow the patient to be in charge, you get great innovations and effective safety nets. No one starves in this country. You have food banks, food stamps to deal with it. Put aside how some of these things are run, but the basic essence is there. We've got basic safety nets. Why can't we do that in health care? Don't have the government do it. Safety nets, yes. Grab free enterprise. People figuring out to do things better. So we have a hideous healthcare regulatory system now. We have tens of thousands of rules and regulations, and nobody knows what the rules are. When you have spending, where does the government get money from? It gets it from you, whether through borrowing, taxing, inflation, printing money, which is another form of taxation. It doesn't come from Mars, it comes from you. One way or the other, they get it from you. Government doesn't create wealth, it has certain things it has to do, like defense, but they get it from you. So spending, taxation, I'll just end on this catechism. Some of you heard it before. Lincoln's Gettysburg Address defined the character of the American nation, all of 272 words. Declaration of Independence, 1,300 words. Constitution, all the amendments, 7,200 words. The Bible, which took centuries to put together, 773,000 words. Now the federal income tax code, and not just the code, but all the attendant rules and regulations that it's created, 19 words and rising. Nobody knows what's in it. The IRS doesn't know. You call them up, fourth of the time, third of the time, they give you the wrong answer. You don't have to go to the Amazon to find exotic creatures. And we now have the highest business taxes in the world. We have a higher tax rate than France does, for crying out loud. That takes real achievement. Beat the French in some form of taxation. So you look at all of it. Taxation, spending, massive rulemaking, law breaking by the government. This IRS scandal is just beginning. Imagine using the most feared arm of the government to suppress people trying to participate in the public square, engage in free speech, engage in persuasion. It never happened before on that scale. They used to go after individuals, the abusers, but going after whole groups. You have a certain name, well, we're going to come after you. That's how you get tyrannies. Well, that's not going to happen to us. And your being here today is proof of it. We've got a strong candidate here. He's been in the private sector. He knows what it's like to make things happen. Knows what happens when you make a success in the jobs that it creates and the opportunities it creates. Family knows all about that. Anyone who raises kids knows that social engineering is preposterous. Kids fight each other. Same parents, but they fight each other. You expect to have Washington create artificial harmony by telling us what to do. They've obviously never raised kids, especially teenagers. We have 5 daughters and got through the teen years, and the mother that was some challenging times. So the idea of Washington dictating to us is you just scratch their heads. Where are these people from? And so Rod understands all that. Real people doing real things. Now wants to go to Congress and be a citizen representative, which is what our founders originally had in mind. Somebody coming out, taking time out from what their occupation is, what they do in the community and with family, and their business, and going in and try to do something for a handful of years, and do something positive, and then return home. The example of our first president, George Washington, King George III, was amazed that after the Revolution, he did not become king or military dictator, which he could have easily have done. Instead, he went back home. And when the Constitution, when we realized we needed a new Constitution, he's called out of Virginia and come to preside over the Constitutional Convention. And then becomes our first president, sets this precedent, which is now embedded in the Constitution, 2 terms. He voluntarily, after 8 years, he could have stayed forever if he wanted, voluntarily stepped down and demonstrated even that he never got corrupted by power. He set the example. Power is there to serve the people. Power has to be restricted through checks and balances. That's what the Constitution's about. So it serves the people instead of oppresses the people. Rod understands this. got to get them through the primary and into Congress, and others like it, so we get this country back again. Take it out of the hands of those who think they can do better than we can. Maybe some of them can, but they got to earn your trust and support and recognize they're supposed to work for us, not for themselves and for elites that think they know better than we. That's not what the origins of this country was about. We showed just the opposite. You have a good Republican Constitution. You have people participating for the right reasons. You can go through enormous crises, depressions, wars, and the like, disruptions. We come through it because free people, we make mistakes, but we always learn from those mistakes and move forward. We never stay in a rut. Figure out how do we make this better. We can make this country better again. Where we're at today, thankfully in history, once we elect Rod and others like him, thankfully in history will be seen, as I said, detour, not the ultimate journey. Thank you very much. Candidate and then congressman serving us, will be representing us, not bossing us, but representing us, representing the best of this country. Next congressman from the 1st District, that R will be there again. Red is the right color here. True, good patriot, Rod Blum. Thank you.
So much, everyone, for being here today. I can sense the momentum. This is going to be a good November. Before I get started, I'd just like to say I'm honored and humbled to have Steve Forbes' endorsement in this race, and equally as excited that he would come to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and help us. People, Steve was into liberty, he was into economic freedom, he was into sound money and lower tax rates and regulations before it was cool. And I must say, I can't think of Steve Forbes since I helped him out in the year 2000 when he ran, but I can't think of Steve Forbes without thinking of his famous quote, and I wrote it down here so I don't get it wrong, and I'll try to do it justice, Steve. When he says the tax code is a monstrosity and there's only one thing to do with it. Scrap it, kill it, drive a stake through its heart, bury it, and hope it never rises again to terrorize the American people. Thanks very much to Kim Ring, wherever Kim's at, for introducing Steve. Thank you for your tireless work on behalf of GOP. I've been described as a lot of things, Kim, but red has not been one of them. And also, Brent's here. Brent, stand up. Brent sang the national anthem for Mitt Romney and you Here's a kid that when he gets home from school will go to his grandparents' house, stand in the corner of Dyersville and hold up a Blum for Congress sign as the cars go by. He'll do that. Appreciate that. I'll keep this short because I know you're here to meet Steve personally, and we'll be around for half an hour when we're finished here, so if you want to take your picture with him, shake his hand and get to know him better, please do that. So I'll try to keep this as short as possible. Briefly, I'll give you my background. I'm born and raised in Dubuque. My parents had 10th grade educations. My father quit high school in the 10th grade to serve in the United States Navy in World War II, and my mother quit high school in the 10th grade to marry her sailor before he shipped out to the Pacific Theater to fight the Japanese. We didn't have a lot growing up. Half of the floors in our house had unique floor coverings called dirt. True. And my father, since we moved into the city, was against regulations to raise any kinds of animals, so he thought he'd outsmart the government, so we raised chickens in the attic. Story. And I remember there's 4 of us boys, we all had to take turns feeding the chickens, and we all had pet chickens, and I will never forget the 2nd grade coming home from school, going up that ladder, looking for my pet chicken, and it was not there. And I came down, I said to my mother, "Where's my pet chicken at?" And she said, said, never mind. I got an undergraduate degree in finance and a master's degree in business, and I set out to work on my version of the American dream. And I ended up in the software industry, the fledgling software industry at the time. And the company, Eagle Point Software, grew from 5 employees to 325 employees over 5 years. We went public on the NASDAQ Stock Exchange. We had a special article written about us in Forbes magazine. Thank you very much. And as a result, I was named Iowa Entrepreneur of the Year in 1994 and Governor Branstad's Exporter of the Year in 1995. And isn't it amazing, as I think about this, that a kid who came from dirt floors, raising chickens in the attic, parents with 10th grade educations, can be on the same stage with Steve Forbes. And the reason for that is because the country I grew up in was a country of opportunity. Ronald Reagan was president, the economy was booming, hard work was rewarded, high educational achievement was rewarded, good behavior was rewarded, playing by the rules was rewarded, and that's why I can stand on the stage with Steve Forbes today. Briefly go over the 5 things our campaign has always been based on, and there are 5 things I believe deeply in. The first is personal responsibility. Personal responsibility underpins liberty. And I can sum it up with one sentence. Government should not do that for a person or a corporation, that which they can do for themselves. We have over 48 million of our fellow citizens on food stamps. We have 75 million fellow Americans who are on Medicaid. All told, we have over 100 million Americans receiving some type of federal welfare assistance. Now, the Eastern Iowans I've been talking to the last 14 months do not want a government handout. They want a good job. They want a booming economy. And we need to, the Democrats in the fall will talk about helping their fellow citizens by how many food stamps they're going to give them, and how dependent they're going to make them on the government. We need to have a rebirth of opportunity, a rebirth of freedom. We need to talk about independence, a booming economy, and everyone's wages will go up and prosperity will go up. Secondly, constitutionally limited government. Thomas Jefferson, pretty bright guy. I'll paraphrase one of his quotes. He sums it up pretty well when he said, there are 2 kinds of people, 2 kinds of groups that can do harm to the great citizens of this nation. The first is criminals. The second is government. Let us bind the second group with the chains of the Constitution so they do not become legalized members of the first group. And is that not where we're at today? My friends, as I've been campaigning for 14 months, the question I am asked probably the most is, how does President Obama get away with fill in the blank? With the Justice Department wiretapping AP reporters? How does he get away with NSA spying on American citizens? How does he get away with the IRS auditing conservative groups like Tea Party groups? How does he get away with selectively enforcing laws like Defense of Marriage, the DOMA Act? How does he get away with selectively enforcing immigration laws? How does he get away with, and it never ends, as Steve talked about. Never ends. It's a lawless administration. We need to get the President Obama and that office, the executive office, back in the box. Our system was set up beautifully with checks and balances. We need to reinstitute those checks and balances. And Congress, particularly the House, of which I want to be a member, needs to take back its constitutional power. Cornerstone, third principle I believe deeply in is fiscal. I used to say fiscal common sense. Now I just say fiscal sanity. We all know we have $17 trillion national debt and growing. In fact, our national debt is now bigger than our economy. You say, well, what difference does that make? That makes a big difference. Most economists don't agree on most things. Would you agree, Steve? In fact, I think it's President Truman said I was looking for a one-armed economist his entire career, because economists always say, well, on the other hand. is where we're at. President Reagan said it beautifully when he said, no nation can tax and spend its way to prosperity. He was right in 1980, and it's right today. We need a constitutional amendment to balance the budget and to limit spending. And if the 435 members of the House and 100 members of the Senate want to increase spending, you have to increase the economy. Fourth principle, I believe in free markets, and Steve talked about those beautifully. We have fallen, my friends, to number 12 in the world in the Heritage Foundation's Economic Freedom Index. We are behind such economic powerhouses as Chile and Estonia. I will fight. You send me to Congress. I promise you I will fight tirelessly to move us up in the rankings. The United States of America should be number 1 in those rankings, because we all know in this room, we all know as you move up in economic freedom, you will also move up in prosperity, correct? I will fight tirelessly for that. Lastly, sanctity of life. I am pro-life, and I think our founders got it right. Yes. I think our founders got it in the right order. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Without life, you cannot have liberty. Okay, and without life and liberty, we as a nation cannot pursue happiness. So they got it in the right order, and I'm unabashedly pro-life. I'd just like to summarize here, and Steve, I think he mentioned it to this group. President Obama, Nancy Pelosi, Harry Reid and company, they're trying to convince us that this is the new normal, that 100 million of your fellow Americans being dependent on government is the new normal. Let's send a message in November that this is not the new normal. Let's send a message that we want to be a society that has a culture of opportunity. That's why this is called the rebirth of Freedom and Opportunity Rally today. The Democrats talk about food stamps. We want to talk about jobs. Democrats are going to talk in the fall about Obamacare and how successful it is. 8.5 million people signed up. We shall talk about the millions of people who have lost their physicians, the millions of people who have lost the hospitals they like to go to, the millions, tens of millions of people who have had their insurance policy canceled, and the millions of your fellow citizens that are going to lose their jobs because of the disastrous legislation. Also, yes, it is disastrous. I would agree with that. This is the things they're going to talk about. We are not going to let them control the microphone on these issues. We are going to focus on working families and the middle class this fall. I think far too often we talk about statistics and numbers, and we don't talk enough about people and families. My friend, since Barack Obama took the oath of office 6 years ago, the average working family's income has gone down. The average family, the average middle-class working family's net worth has gone down since Barack Obama took office. The average savings in this country for the working family is about $2,000. They are a couple missed paychecks away from bankruptcy, a couple missed paychecks away from government dependency. At the same time, prices are skyrocketing. We know the price of food is going up. The price of a gallon of gasoline has doubled. The price of health care has gone up more than that. And double the price of health care is the price of a college education. So our middle-class families in this country are stressed, and with due reason. Incomes down, prices up. The solution to that, not more government, not more government dependency. The solution to that is a booming economy. Had we done what Ronald Reagan did in the 80s, we would have 12 million more jobs today. We'd be at full employment. That's what we're going to talk about, getting this economy booming. And they can put up all these other issues as if they're smoke screens, talking about other things. But really, we're going to bring this conversation all the time back to a booming economy. Because this economy, and they want us to believe it's the new normal. This is not the new normal. 1.1% growth in the first quarter is not the United States of America. We can do this. There's no doubt we can win this race in November. And as we head toward this primary in June and the general in November, I can't think of a better line to leave you with than President Reagan when he said, "Let us raise a flag of bold colors, not pale very, very much